Hey out there. On today's episode, I will touch on MS support groups, how temperature affects us MSers, and also have my conversation with Dave Gordon, a local MSer and Edmonton Oilers blogger. Stick around. Hey out there. Thanks for listening to episode 3. I was snooping around online today, as I do a couple times a week, just looking for, articles and things about MS, just to check that I have all the latest info, or see if there's a, maybe there's a cure and then everything's all good, right? But no cure today, unfortunately. However, I did see an article about a MS group in Myrtle Beach, California, where actually they're a couple of local MSers there have decided to start their own support group on their own with the support of their local MS society. And it got me to thinking about, my conversation with Neil Blue, which will be coming up in a future episode of this podcast, and how he's talked about starting a mentor program, which I think is a great idea. I mean, in a previous episode, I talked to Megan Cooper about the mentorship program, and I've never yet to talk to an MSer that didn't think it was a great idea. I mean, I think we all know how lonely it can be, especially when you first get diagnosed. And it's interesting today, I'm reading this article about, these people in Myrtle Beach starting a support group. And then I happen to be checking Facebook, and I've got an invitation from someone in the Young Adults with MS in Greater Edmonton Facebook group for an event in September, a meeting in September. There wasn't a lot of details. It looks like it's still to be announced, but it's exciting for me to get out there and talk to other people, to socialize. I shouldn't say get out there and talk to it, to socialize with other MSers. So I just find it very, very calming and therapeutic to know that I'm not on my own. And I think as a group, a lot of us have a tendency to believe that sometimes that we're by ourselves when we're not. Anyway, this group in Myrtle Beach, this gentleman, Mr. Tate, who was sort of the inspiration or the guy getting it going, he was talking about how in their first meeting they are having a physical therapist come to talk to the group, and his quote was, they found that exercise for multiple sclerosis is extremely important. She, being the physiotherapist that's coming to talk to the group, is going to talk about how to determine what regimen is right for you, because everyone with MS is so different. And that's true. I mean, we're all different. We all have different mobility issues, different ways that the disease affects us, and it's not consistent for any of us across the board. So, it would be important to tailor an exercise program to what you're able to do. When people have reached out to me through my website or because of the really long run or whatever and asked me about training with MS, this is how I always look at it. I believe exercise is crucial. Not just from the physical component, of obviously having a healthier body, but I think mentally it's very important to challenge yourself and try and improve what you can do physically, even if it's just a little bits at a time. And what I always say is, if it starts with trying to walking to the end of the block. I mean, if that's a challenge for you, start with walking to the end of the block, and once you're comfortable with walking to the end of the block, try walking around the whole block. And then maybe you'll find that, you get to the point where you're walking 500 meters or a kilometer or 2 kilometers, not necessarily easy, but with more ease than when you started. And maybe you find that in 6 months or a year, you think, hey, I'm going to try a light jog, but just doing it slow and incremental and safely, I think is the way to go for anyone with MS. I mean, obviously running an ultramarathon is a completely different kettle of fish altogether, but my point being is that, you should at least try just to improve, because it really does help mentally. I find that when I'm having a bad day mentally, and getting out and going for a run elevates my mood, makes me feel better, makes me feel better about myself. I don't feel like a disabled person because I was just able to run, say it's 10K or 15K or however long I went that day. And it's a positive thing I can do for myself. So yeah, I agree with this gentleman down in Myrtle Beach that, exercise is important. I think it's a great idea to have somebody like a physiotherapist come and talk to the group. And I think the MS groups in general, interacting with other MSers has a huge impact. I know for myself, doing this podcast, talking to other people with MS and being really honest, that not only has it been therapeutic for me, but it's made me realize some things about myself and how I've been treating my disease and how I've been interacting with my disease. And it was pointed out to me, and you'll hear this in a future interview. This is the interview with Neil Blue that'll be coming out in a couple podcasts time. But he challenged me and he made a good point. And his point is that, I can't pretend like I don't have it. And that's one of the things that I do is I try and act as though I don't. And what that does is that people around me start to feel like, and they start to forget. And I've had people say to me, they forget that I have it. But so when I do have a bad day, it's you can just tell. They wonder, like, well, there's nothing wrong with him. And there's just some of those those days where you just need an extra couple hours of sleep, or you just need to not deal with things or whatever. So anyway, it's been a really good experience for me, having all this contact with other people with MS. And so I think these support groups are vital. So I hope that I get a chance to go to this young adults with MS in Greater Edmonton event in September. And I wish the people in Myrtle Beach well. I think that's awesome. I think it's fantastic that they've gotten together, and it's just adds more fuel to my fire to try and keep doing this podcast and help people like Neil and others that want to get active and want to be, want to help others in our community and, get things moving and get support things in place. So anyway, that's enough about that. Another thing I looked at today, and I found it, I wouldn't say I found it humorous, but a little bit humorous, is one of the constant battles in my house is about temperature. And my wife's a very cold person, and as I'm one of those MSers that heat's a trigger for me, and I get very warm when I sleep. So we have difficulty trying to find that happy balance. I mean, she'll be under a duvet and I'll be having no blankets at all, and she'll be under a duvet, blue lip, teeth chattering, and I'll be, no blankets on at all and just sweating. And it's just to find that balance of where we both can be comfortable, because even though I have MS, I love my wife and she needs to be comfortable too. So it's just finding a balance. Anyway, I was looking at this article posted by a Dr. Lassoff, and I hope I pronounced that right, and how he was talking about, and the name of the article is How Temperature Affects People with Multiple Sclerosis. And, one of the things that he mentions in the article is that between 60 to 80% of people with MS are sensitive to heat. And that's probably not surprising if you're somebody with MS listening to this. Chances are you fit into that category and you have some sort of sensitivity to heat. Mine's kind of weird though. I mean, it can be 30 degrees outside, 28 degrees outside, I'm fine. If I'm outside, I'm fine. If there's air moving around me, I'm generally okay. I can't be in a house that's warm with still air. I just can't. It makes me just go crazy. An example is my wife's parents. They like a warm house, and as does my wife. They just like a warm house, and some people do. I'm not one of those people myself, but they like a warm house. And I remember when we first were dating, we went there for dinner, and I wore a sweater, and it was just a sweater, like I didn't have a t-shirt or anything underneath, because it was wintertime, and but they keep their house at like 23, 24 degrees, and they've got in-floor heating, and with that in-floor heating, the thing I could never have it because I don't mind a draft, and when you have in-floor heating in a home, there's no place where there's no cold spots. You can't find one because every section of the floor is radiating heat. So, it's middle of winter, and I ended up standing out on their deck for a few minutes to cool off. And yeah, I'm just but for me, it's if I'm inside and it's warm, I can't seem to do it. But if I'm outside, it doesn't seem to bother me. I'm better in dry heat. Like growing up in Kamloops, it's a semi-desert. You'd have days in the high 30s there in the summer, and it was quite common. But it was dry there, so it didn't really bother me as a kid. Granted, I wasn't diagnosed yet, and I wasn't showing symptoms yet. But even when I've gone back since, and if it's 30 plus degrees there, it doesn't bother me as much. For example, I was in Cancun last March, and very humid. That's worse. The humidity gets to me. But again, if I'm outside and there's air moving around me, I'm okay. So anyway, this article, he mentions in it, they're trying to discover or describe why people with MS may have, why this may be happening. And what he mentions in it is that, and this is a quote, is that it could be a disturbance or a block in normal physiological nerve conduction members. And, it just goes on to basically saying that any places where the myelin sheath have been damaged, they don't conduct the electrical signals back and forth in your nervous system. They can only conduct low frequency signals, and it's because of that not all the information maybe needs to be going where it's going, and that could be the reason why we experience it. He does mention that it does, people that are sensitive to heat, it does seem to worsen the symptoms. And I know that's for me, that's definitely true. If I get overheated, the numbness gets a lot worse. It does a number on me. But he also mentions that, the heat sensitivity could cause cognitive problems. So I know if I get too hot in the house, I can blame any mistakes to my wife on the fact that I'm having cognitive problems because of my disease. And, she may buy it or she may not. It is what it is. But both those articles, I will leave a link on the blog for them if you're interested in reading them. And and on today's episode, it was a really great conversation. The gentleman that I spoke to, his name's Dave Gordon, and how Dave and I met was online. It was one of those online kind of deals, but not like an online dating site. How it came to pass is Dave got diagnosed with MS about not quite 2 years ago. And Dave is an Edmonton Oilers blogger, and him and another gentleman started a blog called theoilersrink.com a couple of years ago. And they got a great group of writers there. So if you're an Edmonton Oilers fan, check it out, theoilersrink.com. Great place to go for anything Oilers. And I occasionally post there too because I'm a hockey junkie myself. And so anyway, Dave got diagnosed, and he started snooping around online, probably like we all do, just looking for anything, looking for information. And anyway, he came across my MS website, ownmultiplesclerosis.com, and he read a lot of the posts I was doing there, and he had sent me, and then he discovered through that website that I also was an Edmonton Oilers, a blogger myself. I mean, I've been blogging at a website called Oilers Addict for a number of years. I don't as much anymore. It was definitely, being a hockey blogger was definitely something that was a lot easier when I was single and I didn't have children. And now that I've got 2 young kids and a wife, finding time to dedicate to it just isn't there anymore. So it's just an occasional hobby thing now that I do. But anyway, he's discovered the own multiplesclerosis.com. Noticed through that website that I also had was a post on a site called the Oilers Addict. And he thought, hey, I'm going to reach out to this guy. So he sent me an email explaining who he was and how he just got diagnosed, and we just kicked off a relationship from there. And he ended up riding with me in the MS bike tour this past May, or was it June? Sorry. And and he's a really, really great guy. So the conversation that we have is we had it at a Starbucks in Northeast Edmonton about a month ago. And I do apologize for some of the audio. I am definitely learning about picking my places where to record these things. We were sitting out in a patio, and the odd time you'll hear a Harley go by, or you'll hear the bus, and I apologize for that. I mean, I'm new. I wasn't, I'm not trained on how to do this, so I apologize for that. But I managed to clean it up pretty good, so you can definitely hear what we're talking about. And we just talk about Dave's story and how he came to be on the podcast and how we got to know each other. And it was a really good conversation. And Dave, if you're listening to this, it's been a really good journey getting to know you. It's just, as we both told each other, it's really helpful when you have somebody else that's going through the same kind of thing that you are, and you can reach out and, just having somebody there as support who knows what you're going through. Because I think one of the things that, again, if you're an MS and you're listening to this, and you probably know what I'm saying when I say this, if somebody doesn't have the disease, they just don't know. I mean, they can try to understand, but they just don't know. And that's why it's really important. And back to the support groups, when at the opening of this, why I think they're important is because I really think that you need those people in your life that understand what it is that you're going through. So Dave, here's the conversation with Dave. We talk about his journey, and we also talk a little hockey. So if you're not a huge hockey fan, when we started into the hockey talk, the great thing about technology now is very easy to fast forward and just skip that part. It's very apparent. There is a segue into the hockey talk, so you can just fast forward and cut it out. So anyway, take a listen. So today I'm talking to Dave Gordon. Some of you may have heard of him through the OilersRig.com. And the reason I'm talking to Dave is Dave was on my bike team for the MS bike tour this year, and we got to know each other online. And Dave, it's the first time we've ever had somebody else on the bike team that had MS as well, so I wasn't as alone. So I'd like to thank Dave for taking the time to talk to me. And Dave, why don't we start off by, why don't you just give us your story?
Well, I guess my story is about one afternoon. I got out of my car and I thought my feet were asleep, and that feeling didn't go away for a little while, so I went and saw my family doctor eventually after a few days of that, the foot asleep feeling kind of moving up my legs, and ended up for my family doctor at the U of A hospital for a while, all the tests, and yeah, it turned out I was diagnosed, the whole period probably from first symptoms to diagnosis probably took about 8 months, and yeah, diagnosed with MS, and been living with it since.
I know for me, when I first went into emergency, and they told me, you're going to get tested for this, and they asked about family history and that. And the same thing, it was, a period of several months between that and going through tests and MRIs. What was going through your head?
At first, when I went to the U of A, my family doctor made a call, and I got rushed to the neurology department at the U of A. So I was terrified. I had no idea. He asked me if I wanted to go in an ambulance, and I said no, and I drove myself. And I got there, and all the tests and everything, and the doctors, they were confused. They weren't sure what was wrong, and I ended up spending 4 days in the neurology ward at the U of A. And I was terrified. I thought I had cancer. I did. I thought years ago, an acquaintance of mine, he had shoulder pain, and he went in, got an X-ray, and they found a huge tumor that showed up in an x-ray in his chest. And I thought, oh, there it is. I said, I've got cancer. It's somehow affecting my spine, and that's why I can't feel my legs. So really, in the end, the MS was probably a pretty positive outcome from what I was thinking. But the whole period, the whole time, the doctors prepared me. They said, okay, we think you might have MS. And even then, I didn't know anything about the disease. It was just a pretty scary time all around, researching about different treatments and different ways my life could possibly go, and trying to prepare yourself for what's ahead.
So you're not quite 2 years in since your diagnosis. How's your head been?
As far as like mentally, comes and goes. I have good days, I have bad days, I have good weeks, I have bad weeks. I have a great support structure at home, and that's probably key. But the fatigue, I think, and Sean, you know what it's like, and anybody that has MS or knows people with MS that always complain, that not always complain, but they're tired. And that tired isn't just being tired. It's not like, oh, you stayed up too late. It's you're exhausted. And sometimes from doing nothing.
It doesn't matter how much you sleep, right?
It doesn't. Yeah. You can sleep for 12 hours and get up and an hour later go back to bed for 12 more hours.
Yeah.
So the fatigue, I think, is what drains on me mentally. Like when I get tired, and especially from not doing anything, I was always very active. And now I can't go hard for a week doing a whole bunch of stuff, busy every day anymore. If I do that you can write off the next week. So that fatigue drains on a guy mentally. You just making changes to things that you were used to normally doing is hard, and I think that probably comes with anything, not just with getting a diagnosis of MS.
Well, you golfed today. How'd that go? Like, how's that different?
I golfed today, and you know what? And I've got hockey tonight. But it took me, after the diagnosis, I probably didn't exercise for 6 months. Nothing. I was, you could probably say, clinically depressed. I sat on the couch. I moped around. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't visit with people because I didn't think I could anymore. And then I just got to a point where I said, wait a minute, I don't really feel that bad. Maybe I should try exercising. And then I started running a bit. And then I met you and joined your bike team. So I started biking. And then finally this year, after 2.5 years of not playing hockey, I played my first game a week ago. And I felt great. Like, I feel awesome after I exercise. But like I said, if I exercise too much, then there you go, back into that fatigue state. So you got to watch. And it's a big change.
Well, I know, just speaking of getting run down on that, Dave, as you know, I did that really long run. It's the 23rd, so 2 months ago. And immediately after that, 2 weeks later, I did the bike tour with you. And then right after the bike tour, I had to fly around BC and Alberta for work. And I had a minor flare-up the week after. And where I basically had to stay home from work one day and just sleep. And I don't know if you've had days like that where it's all I need to do. I just need to go to sleep for 12 hours, 16 hours, and then things start to right themselves. And the owner of the company I work for pulled me in his office. He said, so, should I be worried? And I said, no, I just ran myself down. And I'm an extreme case because I do extreme things, but, I think that's kind of par for the course. Excuse the pun, I know we just mentioned golfing, but I think it's kind of par for the course with MS, right? It's just kind of the way it goes. Now, you have 2 daughters and a wife. How old are your daughters?
9 and 5, going on 16.
Do they understand what's going on with Dad?
My oldest does. She doesn't know a lot about the disease. She asks questions, and I tell her. She's kind of the one, she'll push me. She'll say, good for you, Dad, after I did the run, stuff like that. Doing the bike tour, Sean, the only reason I even finished that bike tour, because the conditions that day were the worst, was because I knew that they'd be at the finish line waiting for me. So they're supportive. My wife, of course, is supportive as always. I don't think it would have mattered if I was with disease or without. It's the same for her. And she knows when I need a good kick in the ass, and she also knows when she needs to tell me to go lay down and have a rest.
Yeah, I understand you there. My wife will, every now and then, especially if I'm getting mopey and sort of depressed, she'll be the first one to say, "Why don't you go for a run?" Because she knows that'll make me feel better. But when you're in a fatigue state or a depressed state, it's kind of hard to get motivated to go. And sometimes you just have to force yourself. And I find when I have to force myself, it takes about 10 minutes of running, and then I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad. So why don't we talk about the bike tour? Because I know that was a pretty, is powerful a good word to use for it?
Yeah, probably the perfect word to use for it. So you and I had talked, Sean, lots prior to the bike tour, but before that I hadn't really met anybody on the team, and nor had I really met any other MSers. So it was not the two biggest things for me are the amount of support that people with MS have, because you and I are riding, maybe for ourselves, but I think for others as well with MS, so we can help fundraise for a cure. But there were nearly 2,000 people there.
I think there was over actually this year.
So I think at the end of the day, there was about 35 people that rode that had MS.
You can't judge by the people that go on stage because we don't all go up on stage.
That's true.
Right?
So that was the most powerful thing, like seeing all those people that are supporting you and I, and they really are, whether they're not doing it directly, but they really are. They're trying to help us out, and that was pretty like a bit of an emotional thing for me to try and get over and realize. And then the other thing was just a sense of accomplishment. Like coming across that finish line after 3.5 hours from Leduc on the way to Camrose was probably one of the coolest feelings I've ever had, because after, like I said, sitting at home for 6 months and not exercising at all, here I am, I just rode my bike 90 kilometers. And I did it. And it was amazing. And then you come to the finish line, and anybody that hasn't ridden it before, you really should. It's just a great experience overall. But you come into the finish line, and there's people there cheering you on. They don't know you. They don't know you from someone they've never seen before. So to be able to experience that, like the sense of accomplishment, and even though the next day, like I said, kind of wanted to give up a little, but for someone that at the time I hadn't been challenging myself enough to do that, like it made me realize I can pretty much do anything that I work for, regardless of whether I'm a perfectly healthy human being or a perfectly healthy human being living with MS.
Yeah, I think the big thing is if you want to do something, you just got to be stubborn about it. And you make up your mind you're going to do it, and be damned what people tell you. That's my take on it. So now you and I met in kind of an interesting way. I'd like to hear how your side of that story.
Well, so originally, like before we met in person, I was newly diagnosed and researching MS, and I came across your blog, going on ownmultiplesclerosis.com. I read a whole bunch of your articles and still had a lot of questions, so I reached out to you and I sent you an email. And then through a bit of email correspondence, realized that you were also a hockey blogger at OilersAddict.com. And so we had that two mutual things going for us right there. And then as time went on, we kept saying we were going to meet, The OilersRig.com does a fundraiser every year for MS. And what we'd agreed as a group at the Oilers Rig was we were going to donate a portion of whatever we made at the fundraiser to your really long run. And so after that was done, we finally managed to get together at an MS pub night. And then I presented you with a check for $1,000 from the Oilers Rig and its readers, really. That's where the money comes from. And not only that, you and I got to sit, and we were sitting with other MSers. Patricia Jahufka was sitting there, and we sat there and told each other's stories. It was, again, meeting MSers, hearing their stories, hearing that they're going through similar things as you and I are. That was one thing it took a little while for me to cope with. I kind of thought, even though I knew I wasn't, I'm the only one that's going through this.
Yeah.
So yeah, we met at the pub night, and then the next time we seen each other was the morning of the ride, and we ended up spending 3.5 hours together pretty much the whole way.
Yeah,
Riding our bikes.
I think we talked hockey 2 hours of that 3 hours.
Oh, at least.
Yeah. I don't think we solved all the Oilers' problems that day, but
Maybe a few.
yeah. Yeah, I found that pub night that we went to, and actually this might surprise you to know, this has really been, over the last year, this has been really the first time I've really interacted with other people outside of the blog. I mean, with people from the MS Society. I mean, I've done the bike tour, but I didn't really engage with the MS Society. I just signed up, raised my money, did the bike ride, and so that actually sitting in the pub with you that night with Patricia, it's one of the first times I've ever really engaged and had that type of conversation with other MSers, and I don't know how you found it, but I guess you just said. I mean, it was nice to know that you're not on an island by yourself, and there's other people with the same struggles and challenges and everything that you have. So now I should note that to anyone who's listening, is the reason why it's kind of noisy is we're sitting on a Starbucks patio in northeast Edmonton, so you have to excuse the Harleys and trucks and things going by. Now, personally, how are you managing the disease? What are you doing for treatment?
For treatment, I'm taking disease-modifying therapy, Avonex. It's a once-a-week injection, and that's actually going fairly well. So between my last 2 MRIs, I did have 6 new lesions, except none of them are active. So right now, the disease is actually on hold. I've got no active lesions on my brain.
Did they use the word remission, or they just said on hold?
On hold. Okay. No active disease was the word that my neurologist used. So huge news. After the bike ride, actually, and like you said, you wore yourself down and you had a bit of a very small relapse. Well, for about a month, I was completely numb from the bottom of my feet up to about the middle of my torso. And I honestly thought, I said, okay, well, this is the new me. Like, I'm going to have to get used to this, because it lasted a whole month. And I said, okay, I got to get used to it. Then one day I woke up and it was gone. But again, I think that's from running yourself down. Now, people with MS, the ones I've met, tend to make a lot of changes in their life, whether it be diet, exercise. And like I said earlier and repeatedly, that it took me a while to realize that I can exercise, but I'm in the last probably 16 months, maybe less, 12 months, I'm down 15 pounds. I've been eating better, not perfect. I still hit McDonald's every now and then. So I've been trying to live a bit healthier lifestyle. I'm exercising more. I'm still riding the bike. I'm back running again, and like I mentioned, I'm playing hockey. So
you're running. So you're going to run with me next year?
I'll run a portion with you next year. I'm not running 82 kilometers. Actually, I set a goal, and you just mentioned it. If you put your mind to something, and I wrote an article actually on MS, multiplesclerosis.com a while back about goals.
You're due for another one, by the way.
I am due for another one. But about writing goals, or setting goals, and I set a goal to be able to run 10 kilometers without stopping by October. So
what are you up to right now?
3.
It's not bad.
It's a start. So I'm hoping to be at 5, in the next probably 2-3 weeks, and then from there it seems to get easier.
Do you use anything in your water, or are you just using straight water?
Straight water right now.
One trick I learned, and I swear by it now, and I couldn't believe it. And I just convinced my wife of this just a couple weeks ago. When I was training for the really long run, I got to the point where I was running like 20 to 25, and I found it after 25 I couldn't. That was it. That's when the wall hit, and it was just I couldn't go past it, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me what I was doing wrong, and exchanged it with my neurologist, because he's a distance runner as well. He said, well, what are you using for your electrolytes? What are you using for your, for your energy and stuff? I said, what do you mean? I just got my water bottle. And he basically said, you idiot. He didn't use the word idiot, I'm using that word, but you need to make sure you're topping up your electrolytes as you go, and you have to take in energy, And then the simplest way I can put it is your body's just like a car. There's no gas in it. It's not going to go anywhere. Well, as you're running, you burn through your gas. And the electrolyte tabs make an unreal difference.
Well, I can attest to that because on the bike ride, you gave me one of those tabs.
Oh, yeah.
After the lunch stop.
Yeah.
Not far, maybe 5-6 kilometers down the road because I started cramping up. And not 5 minutes after having one of those tabs, I was good to go again. So, yeah, no, I should look into it, and I definitely will. Especially like 3, 4, 5 kilometers, that's not so bad. I've done that before.
Depends how much you sweat.
And the heat.
Yeah.
But definitely, like for the longer distance bike rides that I've been doing, that's probably something to really look at because I get to about the 45 kilometer mark on the bike, and that's I've had enough. And the body doesn't want to go similar to your 25 kilometers running, the 45 kilometer on the bike, and my legs are saying, yeah, no more.
Now, have you made any dietary modifications? And the reason why I ask is, and you and I have talked about this not while we're recording, but there seems to be a recurring theme in the MS world versus the diet people versus the, I follow my neurologist people. And I happily sit right in the middle. I've made dietary modifications, but I'm more than happy to follow the recommendations of my doctor. So have you tried any of that? Have you looked at any of it?
Yeah, I've looked. To say I've really made a big change, no, probably not. I'll still have my steak once a week. But my wife has always been a healthy cooker. Mm-hmm. So as long as I'm eating her food, I know I'm good. Yeah. I'm a shift worker as well. So I find that's actually one of the biggest adjustments is trying to adjust, not for MS, but for just a healthier lifestyle, especially a healthier diet, is with shift work. It's so easy on the way to work on a night shift to stop at McDonald's and grab a cheeseburger and a coffee and off you go.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So the biggest thing has been changing what I'm eating for snacks, because as a shift worker, and if any shift workers are listening, they'll know sometimes your meal times, which is something they say should be reasonably consistent, are all over the place. So it's making sure that when I pack my lunch, I'm packing healthy food. Avocado is something I eat a ton of. And if I work like a lot of overtime, because my shift work, the way it works, I get an equal amount of days off that I work. So if I work 5 days, I'm generally off for the following 5 days. So even if I am tired, I get a couple days to recover.
Do you do 5/12s? Is that kind of?
Yeah, it's all 12-hour shifts. So there's ways to recover. But if I'm working a lot of overtime, and in fact, my first symptoms came about working a shutdown or a turnaround, and anybody that's worked a shutdown or turnaround in the oil industry knows you're working straight through. We're working 6 days on, 1 day off, 12-hour shifts. So
and you work out Shell and Fort Saskatchewan?
Yeah, out at Shell and Fort Saskatchewan. So that's when my first symptoms came. So I think it coincides. So I've got to be careful with making sure I'm not working too much. The one good thing is about Shell is they have an absolutely great health department. And not only that, they've just been so good to me as far as accommodating, similar to your job. Like if I'm tired or if for some reason I can't work a 12-hour shift, which has never happened, but they've always said, just come let us know and we'll make adjustments for you, which is something really that I didn't expect coming from a previous job where I know it would not have been the same. I got pretty lucky there for sure.
Yeah, I think, you for me, you keyed on something that's very important. For me, managing the disease is having a supportive employer, where when I've had to take a day off. But I mean, I joke with my boss all the time that I take less sick days than most people. I mean, most people on our staff take far more sick days than me. And the unfortunate thing about that, hopefully none of them will ever listen to this, for them, most of it's self-inflicted. I mean, if you're carrying around, a lot of extra weight, or, and I see our fridge at lunchtime, and it's, I guess some people call it food, I wouldn't, but, so I think having a supportive workplace, but it's also how you, ultimately at the end of the day, how you treat yourself, so.
Absolutely. And as far as workplace goes, like the good thing is for anybody that's living with MS, well, you don't have to tell your employer, number one. You don't have to. You might have to talk to somebody in the health department. So it's up to you whether you want to or not. But there's laws there to protect you that if you need to take time because of the disease, you can.
Mm-hmm.
And how each employer deals with that is a little bit different. But everybody should know that they can, and there's programs in place no matter where you are to be able to keep your employment with reason and still be able to manage the disease, manage your symptoms.
Yeah, well, my employer has been great that way, but I have a different kind of job, as I've told you. I set my own schedule. So are you generally feeling pretty optimistic?
Most of the time, yeah. Yeah, I am now, like I said. So I went through probably a good 6-month period where doom and gloom. And I realized, so you and I sitting here talking about having MS there's people that can't go for a run. There's people with MS that can't go for a walk. So you and I, as far as the disease is concerned, are probably pretty lucky.
Oh, we got it easy. Yeah.
We really do have it easy. So that's something I try and remind myself, the days where I'm blah or woe is me, and say, no, wait a minute, Dave, you don't have it that bad. And to go back to where we started our conversation, thinking I had cancer to having MS. Sure, MS is not curable, but it's more manageable than something like cancer is. So really, like I said, we're pretty lucky to be where we are. And
now, did you find, you kind of touched on it a minute or two ago, but when you got diagnosed and you talked about, well, you don't necessarily have to tell your employer, or did you find it hard to tell people? Were you ever in the closet?
Not, maybe for a short time. Obviously, family and close friends first. And then, you know what, if people asked, then I'd tell them. Like, I'm definitely not ashamed of it. I don't feel like I should be treated any differently than anybody else. Obviously, work's made a few concessions so that I can still do my job. That on days, so Avonex for me, I get a pretty strong reaction, side effects day after I take my injection. So Wednesday day shifts, I take my Tuesday night shifts, I take my injection. Wednesday day shifts, I don't work. And work's okay with that. So, of course, when they ask and people say, well, how come you never work Wednesdays? Because I was embarrassed about that. Mm-hmm. Like, every one Wednesday a month I'm missing work. And I was kind of embarrassed. And people started, I'm sure people are going, oh, Dave's missing all this work and it's always on the same day. So if people ask, well, what's wrong or how you doing? Yeah, I had no problem telling them. And actually a bit of it was actually kind of therapeutic for me. And whether people have a right to know or not, no, I don't think so. But I've got no issues, and if people knowing that I'm living with MS. If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here talking with you about it today.
Well, the reason why I asked is just that I have met a few MSers who initially weren't comfortable anyone knowing. I mean, they literally were in the closet, to sort of borrow that term. But and for me, I know initially I was similar to you. I mean, I didn't advertise, but I didn't shy away from it. And how it came about at work was just organically. It just eventually, I had to, if I had to book a morning off for an MRI or what have you. I mean, but it was never, where I sat the people that I work with down and said, oh, by the way,
Right.
I mean, they know now. It's especially with the last year, obviously I become more public and that. So, and there was a few people at work that didn't even know. They didn't find out that they saw me on the news,
mm-hmm.
which was kind of weird. Where they, popped their head in my office the next day, like, I didn't know you had. Well, yeah, I do. By the way, donate some money to my run while you're at it. Now, shifting gears, I can't imagine doing one of these with you without talking a little hockey, just non-MS stuff. So, right now, top 3 things you think the Oilers need to do?
Need to do?
Yeah.
They need to sign another defenseman. They're not set yet there. They've made a good addition, I think, in Sakara. He's not a number 1 guy by any means, but they need another top 4 defenseman in there. Darnell Nurse is still young. He's going to be a rookie this season. I don't think he's Actually, I said today I'm scared he's going to get injured playing a full season against men because he plays the game so hard.
Man, he's fast.
And he's so fast that he's going to, until he starts to get that, and we call it man strength.
Yeah, he's a little wiry still.
I think he could be a risk for injury this season. They've added a few defensemen, but not enough. Sounds like, well, today, as just before we recorded this, the Oilers signed Justin Schultz. It's a move I hate, but we can't do much more about
now
that.
the buyout window's open.
But now the buyout window's open, and that's kind of where I was going. So Nikita Nikitin is a good option for buyout. If you can buy out a guy like him and bring in a guy like Cody Franz and even an older Christian Ehrhoff, someone that can help you for a few years while you let your rookies mature in the system. As far as this, that's the first thing, so more defense. As far as the second thing, skipping ahead, the second thing is battle. I just want to see where the competitions come out. Like there's going to be a goaltending competition this year.
Yeah, do you think Scrivens is just pissed right now?
Oh, he should be.
I hope he is.
Yeah, I hope he is too. Maybe it's the motivation he needs for that 1A, 1B that the Oilers expected to have last year with Ben Scrivens and Victor Faston.
I know it's not supposed to happen, but it wouldn't bother me because I like him as a person. Is if Scrivens got pissed off and he stole the start and dropped the start next season, that wouldn't bother me at all.
No, I don't think it'd bother anybody. And like I said, competition. There is some competition among the forwards this year. There's probably, even with Nikitin in the lineup, there's 8 NHL defensemen. So there's only room for 6 of those. Mm-hmm. So there's good competition. That's something we haven't seen as Oilers fans, as avid watchers of the Oilers in a long, long time. So it's nice. And then the third thing they have to do is just win games. Impress us. Don't be out of the playoffs at the end of November. Yeah. I'd like to still see them still in a race in the middle of February. That would be improvement for me.
Oh, sure. Well, now on your first point on defense. So, would you be okay with Seabrook at 7x7, 8x8? Do you think that's a good idea?
7x7, yes. For 8 years?
For a 30-year-old guy.
You know what? Yeah, I would, because first of all, he comes in here as the Oilers' number 1 defenseman. Number 2, he at a 7-year contract, that brings him to 38 years old at the end of his deal. If his performance slips, he's still Brent Seabrook. At the trade deadline, you will be able to get value for him, whether it's only a couple picks. In the 7th year.
Do you buy into the argument at all? And it's not me. This isn't my argument. It's just one that I've read. Do you buy into the argument at all? But he's never been a number 1 defenseman. No, I don't. Remember in the playoffs a couple years ago when Jonathan Taves was rattled and took that really bad penalty, and Seabrook went into the penalty box and calmed him down? Seabrook's a leader. He can handle 25, 30 minutes a night. He's done it. In the past, sure, he doesn't have Duncan Keith beside him. But you got a guy like Sakara, if you have... But that could be the flip side. I mean, it could be Keith doesn't have Seabrook beside him, right?
Right. I think Keith is, if not the best player overall in the NHL, he's definitely the best defenseman. But no, Seabrook could be just fine on his own. Did you hear that stuff about Keith's
VO2? When he was in college, the VO2 test, when they stick you on that really steep treadmill and they shove those tubes down your throat to see how your lung capacity, and it was just off the charts.
Oh, I believe it.
I think he still has the school record.
He could still be playing right now. If someone didn't tell him that the Hawks already won the cup, he'd still be out on the ice.
It's okay that Chicago only plays with 4 defense, and they can play just 1, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. So I don't know. The Oilers are going to be interesting going forward.
Talbot, what do you think?
I love it. Out of all the goaltending picks, and I wrote about this, out of all the options for goaltending out there, he was my number 1 all along. He was the one guy that I would have had my eyes set on. The other one would have been Eddie Lack out of Vancouver, but getting Talbot. We hear the rumors before the draft about what the Rangers and Glenn Sather are asking for Cam Talbot, and to have a first-round pick. They wanted a first-round pick, and then to have the deal they made. I think that Peter Chiarelli, our new GM, just absolutely stole the show there.
Okay, well, I'm going to flip that on you now. You know exactly what I'm going to bring up. So first-round pick goes for Reinhart. What do you think?
Overpay. That was definitely my first reaction. I think it still is. If you're giving up a first-round pick in a draft that's said to be as deep as it was in 2005, where top 30 picks are still in the NHL all over the place, and the Islanders picked Barzal, who looks to be a good player, I think it's an overpay. Griffin Reinhart definitely has to develop into a top 4 defenseman for that trade to work out. So it's too early to tell now.
Yeah, I think, I've been kind of chuckling to myself over the last few days because there's been a lot written about our fourth line. We lose a center that's been on a 29th and a 29th place team, and people are losing their minds. On the fourth line center, it's like, well, it's just funny to me. The guy that that's been basically playing as our fourth line. But anyway, I think with the Reinhardt deal, I've also been kind of chuckling because I can understand why people see it as an overpay. But don't we have to wait a couple years to see?
So I think we do, and I mentioned that. But I think one of the things about the overpay is he gave up not only the number 16 pick, but also the number 33 pick. When I was watching the draft that day, and the Oilers, Gary Bettman came out to the podium and said, "We have a trade." The Oilers trade the 16th and 33rd pick. As soon as I said that they said the 33rd pick, I said, we're getting a player here. And then we got Griffin Reinhart. And it's not to say that Griffin Reinhart's not a player. But I would have expected that those 2 picks
me too.
in this draft would have been worth a lot more than Griffin Reinhart. Even though, go back, he's a 4th overall pick.
We gave up less for Talbot, and Talbot was supposed to be, you would have thought they would have paid a higher price for him.
Exactly.
Right?
So put those 2 deals together. If you trade, the picks that they traded to the Rangers and the picks that they traded to the Islanders, and you're getting Talbot and Reinhart back, it's probably not that bad of a deal.
Okay, last Oilers question. Yakupov, what happens with him this year?
I think now. So you see, we have a new coach, and I don't know his style that well. Although my wife and this, I think, is a huge San Jose Sharks fan. So I have watched a lot of their games. I think Yakupov is going to get a real big chance to play top minutes with the Oilers this year.
I remember your wife when we were talking about Brett Burns, and she was getting mad at us.
Oh, so mad! She gets so angry. But I think Yakupov could end up on a line with Connor McDavid this year because Yakupov.
Now that's a lottery line I want to see: Hall, McDavid, and Yakupov.
And I think it's a perfectly good idea. I really do, because if you watch Yakupov, yes, he's not the best defensively. In fact, he's been pretty terrible over his years.
Can I ask you a question, bro? Am I crazy in saying this? And I could be. And wouldn't be the first time, right? You know who Yakupov reminds me of? Not Pavel Bure, he reminds me a lot of Brett Hall. A guy who really can't do much for you except for scoring. Yeah. And if he's not scoring, he's not doing much. And the reason why I say that, and the reason why I picked Brett Hall wasn't a dangler. He was a one-shot, put it in my wheelhouse, I'm going to tee it up from, right?
That's a pretty good analogy for him, I think. If he turns out to be Brett Hall.
Brett Hall in Calgary, right?
Exactly. I was going to say, Calgary traded Brett Hall. You never know what'll happen. But he's the guy, he gets to open spots. A lot of the times, you watched him last year, and he gets to open spots, and guys just don't see him. Connor McDavid is a guy that's going to see him.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to see him in those open
spots. Seeing him live at that development game?
It was amazing.
I know it was a development game, I get that, but...
At that point, though, I went to the World Juniors in Toronto last year, and I saw him play quite a few games, and I was amazed at his talent. And this is coming off a broken hand, hadn't played a game in 2.5 months, and he was tied. Max Domi won the forward of the tournament, best forward. I didn't think he should have. He did have the most points, but every time Connor touched the puck, he made stuff happen on the ice. Yeah, I was amazed.
It's never a tournament where a 17-year-old's going to get the best line mates, the best ice time. It's
exactly
right. So it's a 19-year-old tournament. Everyone knows that. But I look at Yakupov and I wonder. I remember I wrote a blog about this sometime last year on Oilers Addict, I think, which means that probably no one read it. where I wondered if trading Yakupov wasn't like Calgary trading Brett Hall way back when. Now, I'm not suggesting that I think Yakupov's got an 86-goal season in him. I don't think anyone does now.
No, not anymore.
But can I see him popping 40 goals in the right situation? All day long. So
I've said this when people talk about trading Yakupov. Sure, go ahead, trade him. The return better be big, which it won't be right now because his value is low. But he's going to go somewhere and be a 30-goal scorer consistently. He's going to have a career in the NHL. I hope it's with the Oilers, especially on, like, you know, for all we say about Craig McTavish being a poor GM, Taylor Hall, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Jordan Eberle all at $6 million a year. That's an absolute steal for those three players.
Yeah.
And a 2-year bridge deal at $2.5 million per for Nail Yakupov looks absolutely great right now.
Yeah, if he gets 25 goals both years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you either trade him for great value, or he's another player on your list that you're going to have to pay $5, $6, $7 million to.
Okay, last thing before we wrap this up. What do you want people to know about MS?
I guess just people to educate themselves. You know, a lot of people, and I was the same way. So before I was diagnosed, I didn't know very much about the disease. What I did know about the disease, I automatically assumed wheelchair, someone that can't function. The majority of people with MS can function just fine. In fact, when you're out at a mall, you probably walk by people every day living with MS. It's a very common disease, and it can be awful at times. But it's manageable, but there is no cure. So I guess the biggest thing I want to know is if people that are listening, if they don't have MS, the reason that we do so much talking and raise awareness and raise money is so that we can find a cure, because it can be a terrible disease. For me, for the most part, I function just as normally as everybody else. I might have a disease, but I'm not disabled. That's kind of what I want everybody to know.
Awesome. Well, if anybody wants to check out Dave talking about the Oilers, they can either go to theoilersrig.com or they can find him on Twitter at @RustyKnuckler. I want to thank you for doing this for me, Dave. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
So we're coming to the end of episode 3. I'd really like to thank Dave Gordon for taking the time to talk to me. Once again, I really apologize for the audio. I really need to plan my interviews better, and obviously the patio next to a busy road is not the best place to do one, so I'll plan better in the future. Anyway, next up in 2 weeks' time will be my conversation with Joe Riley, so I hope you listen to it then.